Are we ready? Oh, we can go, we can go.
Right, we're ready to restart.
I'm showing the lack of leadership. Obviously, Jamie Jones is Buchanan full of leadership himself. Yeah. Like the wheel tappers and shunters. Give them a nudge at the end, Johnny. Give them a nudge. I know, it's shocking. Oh, there you go. We started. Yeah. You're getting all the gossip there. The World Cup is coming. It starts in how many days? Do we know? Less than 50. Less than 50. We're going all around the Northern Powerhouse, aren't we, Phil? Apparently.
If only it existed.
Don't say that. Don't kick us off this tour. It hasn't even started yet. The World Cup is coming. We're all excited. It was supposed to be here last year. Jamie, you've played in the World Cup. What's it like to go out there, wear this shirt of your country, sing the anthem, do all that? What's it like?
2008 wasn't a great example, to be fair. It was the old Leeds and Saints World Cup, wasn't it? But look, when you get an opportunity to represent your country, it's the best thing you can possibly do. I think I remember doing an interview and certainly with the St George's flag and that on white kit, felt like a Knights Templar. I'm a bit of a medieval romanticist anyway. But I'm running out there. It wasn't very often. I played maybe 10 games. But one of the biggest, sort of most gratifying moments of my career was I played against Aussies at Wembley, playing likes of Billy Slater and Greg Inglis and Cameron Smith. And I played them a couple of times when they'd come over with Melbourne Storm at World Cup Challenge, but representing your country is phenomenal. And Steve McNamara did a wonderful job. We used to go down to Loughborough end of season and we'd have a camp there. And I think that's when you really get to understand and respect a lot of the other players in the Super League. Certainly, I'll give you one example of Sean O'Loughlin. I don't think you've realised how good he is or was until you played with him, and what a lovely kid he was as well, even for a Wiganer. You know, so I really enjoyed that part. One of the most gratifying parts of my career for sure, and a big honour, as it always is, to represent your country.
Right, so we won't talk about the World Cup in 2000. We're definitely not going to talk about the World Cup in 2030. I mean, it's all just heartbreak for England. Although, I mean, here is the good historical precedent, of course. 1954, new monarch on the throne, Great Britain win the World Cup. So, 2021/2 World Cup, we're going to win, and we've got 4 chances to win one. So, you know, it's a good opportunity.
We're going to win the wheelchair World Cup.
You're saying that with Jodie so next year?
England. I'll let you get to the semis.
I mean, in fairness, you did play for England, so you can, you know, reflect in glories.
We might win the PDRL.
Yeah.
Which would be great. Captain by a Leeds lad, Scott Govan. I'd have to say, and John will give you an insight onto the teams that are going to be coming over from the Southern Hemisphere, that the women's NRL, which I've seen a little bit of this year, is just at such an elevated level at the moment in terms of just how, it's not just the skill level, I mean you almost take that as a given, but the physicality of that competition is above what we've been seeing here at the moment. And even though we're at home, and I'm really excited about the double-header kick-off at Headingley. I think, you know, England playing Brazil is something we should be celebrating. Jamaica being in a men's World Cup is something we should be celebrating. But I think if we're really honest, I'd be amazed if the England women's team are at a level that the Gillaroos and the Kiwis are at the moment. So I think you have to be realistic about that. The men, I don't know what we're expecting. John watches a lot more NRL than I do. I think we'll underestimate the Australians, even though they'll still be favourites.
Fourth in the world, Phil, they're rubbish now.
They'll have some unfamiliar names and they'll be brilliant. I think the Kiwis have already shown that they shouldn't be underestimated. We saw how good Tonga were in the last World Cup. The opening game against Samoa, if they can pick everybody that they've got available, that'll be a test in itself. But it's what we want. You know, if we're serious about putting international rugby league at the peak of the game, and whatever IMG tell us about the domestic game, there has to be a way of putting internationals and coming up with a schedule whereby they take precedence and players, as many of the top players are as fit to play in those games. That's going to get us more cut through than playing Castle for 12 times in the season. And that's always been the case, we just haven't done it. So where are we? Probably with the withdrawal of Alex Walmsley today puts us a little bit further back. So I'll take 2 out of 4.
It's not bad, is it? At least we've increased our chances by having more World Cups as part of this World Cup, thanks to the inclusive nature of rugby league. Go on then, John. Who's going to win it, apart from Australia?
I think one of the Pacific nations are a huge chance as long as New Zealand. If you look at what's happened since 2017, and I think that World Cup was a good marker. I remember John Key, who was still coaching Wales, but he pointed out, I think it was an interview with the BBC, about the disparity that had been brought in, because obviously Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Tonga, and all their players, if they're not playing in the NRL, they're playing in the Queensland Cup or the New South Wales Cup, obviously with PNG hunters, and just being exposed to those training, that level, the speed of the game, that level every week, just puts them at a higher level essentially. And what Christian Wolf's done with Tonga, I think, is remarkable. I was there in 2019 when they beat Australia, which was a historic moment. They'd beaten Great Britain in Hamilton the week before, which was equally a historic moment. And then obviously PNG went on to beat Great Britain. So I think that there is a shifting of power, and you could say it is away from Australia, because one of the good things is now we have a number of state origin players who are Australian, and they're born and raised in Australia, but they have Samoan parents or Tongan parents, and they're very close to their heritage, and they're electing to play for those nations. And Australia has the player depth that, I mean, we will see, but you could say arguably it won't affect them that much, because James Tedesco can play and Tommy Turbo can go and play for Serbia or wherever. But that's the really interesting thing, and I think obviously New Zealand won the World Cup in 2008, but imagine what a Samoa or a Tonga winning a World Cup would do. I mean, it would be huge.
I mean, we talk about these things, don't we, about what the impact would be if England won the World Cup and the game domestically, but in terms of in Australia, the fact that they're not far ahead now as the world number one, the fact that there are being competitive matches against Samoa, Tonga, etc., is that improving things for international rugby league in Australia? Because obviously, it's a big joke. The Australians don't care. It's only about New South Wales and Queensland.
Well, I think there's a real chasm developing now, and I was actually speaking to a former international today, and he was suggesting that even if Australia lost the World Cup final, there wouldn't be that much change, and he's probably right. I mean, there are a lot of insular people in Australia because it's so far away. But also, if you look at the rep weekend that we had, I think it was June, July, sold out crowd at Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland, huge crowds for Fiji and Papua New Guinea and the Cook Islands, and the fans, the atmosphere, people were really buying into that. So I think there is a lot of people in Australia who want international rugby league to grow. They want to see. There's obviously a lot of people in clubland and even the media who don't. They want to keep the NRL as the premium product and state of origin, but there's a rift there, and I think the way to help things along is have a great World Cup, have fantastic games, great atmospheres, big crowds, and then you can literally say, okay, if this is something we can sell, we have to buy it, we can't even listen any longer. And I think that's the way things are going, because of the likes of Tonga and other things like that, because you've got some of the best players in the world, Brian Toto, Jerome Luai, electing to play for Samoa instead of Australia is a big wake-up call to a lot of people.
We're going into a World Cup, Peter, where obviously England aren't going to be at their strongest. We know that because of injuries. Does it matter for the tournament to be a success or not that England aren't in the final with a chance of winning the tournament?
I think the tournament will be a success. I think it's been really well run in the build-up. It's been well marketed. It's got some good people looking after it. It would help if England get to the final, particularly if they win it. But I think Old Trafford will sell out for the final anyway, and that's going to be great. It did in 2017. England didn't get that year after. Even by England's standards, a heartbreaking defeat in the semi-final to New Zealand. It would help, but I think the tournament will be a success. And I think the fact that we're not saying 100% of Australia are going to win it is a real selling point. I think Australia probably will, because they always do. but not 100% sure of that. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's not an Australia-New Zealand final. Wouldn't be surprised if one of the Pacific nations gets to the final. I think there's a little bit more uncertainty about this tournament, and I think that's great. I think, as I say, the way it's been marketed is very good. I think they've chosen the right sort of venues for the right sort of matches. I think the women's tournament's going to be terrific, as Phil says. I think I watch a lot of the women's game over here, and I think it's going to be quite an eye-opener when we see the Kiwis and the Aussies. But the organisers are hoping for a record crown for the double-headed opener at Headingley. That will be a fantastic occasion. The wheelchair is going to be terrific. I mean, wheelchair rugby league is just such a good sport to watch, and it really works on telly as well. I think that is probably the thing that's really going to make an impact this year is the wheelchair tournament. No, I'm expecting good things. I think it's going to be a really good tournament. Hopefully, normally a series of disasters before the Rugby League World Cup. I don't know if anyone remembers 2000 when there was apocalyptic rain for sort of the entire tournament. I was in Ireland for one of the games and we couldn't get out. The whole place, the whole country was underwater. I think it'll be a lot better than that. Hopefully the weather stays fair, and I think people will turn up. I think people are going to enjoy it.
I'm fairly sure that St James's Park will look much better on the telly than John Inverness stood in front of wherever it was. It in Belfast that first game?
The first game was...
Because Willie Purgeon was kicking for some... I thought, I've never seen Willie Purgeon kick before. Ah, dear. So, obviously, the wheelchair game is the one where England are going to win. Apologies, Jeremy, but... Obviously, it's going to be an England-Wales final. I mean, not put any pressure on, but, you know, obviously, I predict York to do nothing this season in Women's Rugby League, and they won the League Shield, so... Shows you what I know about the game. But... we were talking earlier about how you promote things, giving it to Eddie Hearn or whatever. The thing that struck me about the grand final last year was when you came out onto the pitch with the lights off and you've all got spotlights on you. It's an event. It's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, go back even as short as 3 or 4 years ago, we're in the rugby sports halls that you can imagine. We somebody tried to stream on YouTube and keep the Wi-Fi going. So even in just that short period of time, to have the likes of BBC and Sky Sports actually broadcasting the games that we've got and to making such an event out of it. And as Pete said, it translates really well on TV as well. Now don't get me wrong, in person you definitely hear the hits of the chairs. But if it's one of those games that anybody's going to go, oh, what's this? I think it is going to be the wheelchair game, and I think with the World Cup as well, having the splitting group games and having England's group down based at the Copper Box in London, and my group based at Sheffield, to then come and meet in the semis at Sheffield, it just means that there's a chance to grow bigger crowds, get people who perhaps have gone, it's not kind of my sport, not really bothered about it, and go, wow, we have people turn up to our home games at Leeds Beckett who have just found out via either Foundation or Rhinos tweeting it, promoting it on social media and going, didn't know what to expect. And I think it's that surprise element in one way that is really going to help keep the momentum going within, not just wheelchair, but rugby league as a whole.
Phil, people say that, we've had the Women's Challenge Cup final as part of the semi-final day. I mean, we were there for the great standalone final in 2018 when a huge crowd was at Warrington. And you fell out with someone from the RFL. It was a hilarious time.
It was hilarious.
It was. Double headers for the women's games in the World Cup. Some say we're disrespecting the women by having double headers, not having single games here, there and everywhere.
I think the final at Old Trafford will be sensational, partly because you've got the women's game as the part of the double header with the men's game, and it may well be that both of those matches involve teams outside of the nations that we would predominantly support. Already you're talking about an occasion, and going back to what Jamie was saying about the Hearns, what we're saying about what rugby league needs to look like, it needs to be event-based. You need to give people a reason to want to go to something, because irrespective of who wins, you want to be part of it. And I think the opportunity to see, I believe Australia and New Zealand can't meet in the men's final, they can only meet in the semi-final. So if it was something like Tonga and Australia, you know, why wouldn't you want to be there to see that? But if your women's final, let's say, could be Australia and New Zealand, and you're watching all of these players you've seen on telly actually live in front of you, that is the way to promote it. To have, you know, double-header games of wheelchair, fantastic, you know, you're just getting into it, you're really enjoying it, you're getting to understand it. And the one thing I would say about the wheelchair game is, if you go, it will only take you 5 minutes to forget people in wheelchairs, which might seem like a stupid thing to say, but it's rugby league. You're starting to count the tackles, you're looking at the tactics, you're wondering who's going to chip over and when the speedy guy, which is normally Nathan Collins, is going to come round on a loop, and you know, it's rugby league. Again, without being here to just promote wheelchair rugby league, it is actually non-stop. It's the only variant of rugby league that plays for the full 80 minutes. You can't have a trainer around and just say, oh, I've had a head knock here, can I have 10 minutes? If they do non-stop, they are astonishing athletes. But I think if you get the chance to go to the Copper Box and see 2 games, it's fantastic. It is the way ahead. And yes, at some point they will be big enough to have their own self-promotion. But now, one of the great things about this World Cup, which I would urge everyone to get tickets for, is if you get a chance to see 2 games for the price of 1, take it.
And the post might fall over, which is always funny.
Well, hold on,
We're not going to hell, are we?
we're not going to.
Not going to
Well,
hell.
we might be going to.
We might be going to hell.
They might let us in now.
Oh, no. So we don't want to talk about you playing in the World Cup. We discussed 2008. But what are you looking forward to most about this tournament coming up?
Well, no apologies for going on about it again. The highlight of my year in 2022 was the mid-season international wheelchair game, England-France. We covered that for Sky. And some of the stories that said Bashari, the kid who plays for Catalans, brutal enforcer for England. And Tom Halliwell as well, captain, obviously played at Leeds, broke his leg, I believe, played an amateur game against Mikolaj Ledski, decided, right, my leg's broke, but I want to carry on playing, I've got to play with my mate's wheelchair, and the rest is history. And I don't know if anybody here has been to a wheelchair game yet, but it's unbelievable, it's brilliant. And anybody can have a go at it as well. So James Simpson took me in, and he got me kicking goals, driving around, racing. I remember the first time, I didn't grasp that you've got to put the ball on your knee to carry it and try and trap it in there and use 2 hands. I'm trying, got it under the wing, I'm going down in circles. The great ball's going on here. I couldn't go anywhere. But it's a great game to play, a great game to watch. As Phil's saying, it's really quick, and it's absolutely got the collision and physicality as well. Seb just smashed people to bits, battered the fence, didn't he? Then I think he played with him the week after it for Catalans. But I'm really excited about that, and if you haven't had a chance to go see it yet, go see it. I think the best thing about double headers is it gets you over the line. So I went with the women in 2019 to Papua New Guinea, and I've seen the journey that they've been on, and how the women's game's progressed since then. And all you have to do is look at a grand final, the images of them lifting the trophy in 2018, 2019, 2020. You can see the progression getting bigger and better. Those girls are getting more professional. They've never been any less committed than the men, absolutely. But they've made the most of what resources they've got. And they're changing hearts and minds. So when I was at PNG, the Power Mary, they really were going to schools and changing hearts and minds of a country that's still pretty medieval in terms of the way that they look at the women, in regards to life in general, never mind playing sport. It's great, it's inspiring to see, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. The game at Mount Smart, the semi-final, Tonga, I was there. It was the best game I've ever watched, I reckon, as a spectator. If that had happened in England, them dying moments, fans would have pulled seats up, set cars on fire, but all the Tongans were just singing prayers and singing. I'm like, this is amazing, nearly in tears. And I'm really pleased that Tom Lolo and Fafita and those other guys committed to their heritage. They'll only encourage more to do the same. If you've got a real strong Home Nations sort of competition down in Australia, and then we have got a strong Home Nations competition here, and I know it wouldn't be yet, but with consistency over time, I'd like to think the French who are looking forward to World Cup 2025, Toulouse, Catalans, just, Toulouse going down, to the shame, But bring Ireland into it. Lads like Richie Mile, James Bentley are really proud and excited about playing for them. And you know, throw a few Scottish in there. If you have to put Lachlan Coote for a bit until we get some Scots throwing logs around and wanting to play rugby league as well. That's great. But let's have some sort of consistency, and every now and again merge the two, have a big hellfire of a competition, and yeah, promote world sport. I think the last and most important thing is we're guilty sometimes being really purist about rugby league. So when Aussie said they weren't going to bring the best players over in 2021, everybody was like, oh, we can't have a World Cup without the best players. But the vast majority of people who will watch the World Cup will only see Australia. Don't have a clue who the best players are. I remember watching a women's soccer competition, and it was something like Germany against USA. Now, I don't know anything about women's soccer. I know a fair bit about men's soccer, and I know Germany, a hell of a good team. Germany would smash USA all day long in the men's game. But apparently in the women's game, USA are the best. Right? But I didn't know that. All I saw was Germany playing USA. Now, if I'd watched it, I'd have been as a fan of sport, and I'd go, oh, this is interesting. Now, people who watch rugby league, hopefully, because we want people who don't normally watch it, will just see Ireland against France or Ireland against Jamaica. You know, they're not going to have much of an insight or any sort of bias as to what they've seen before. And as long as the games are competitive and cultural, and we're shining those kits, flying the flags, and we're filling the stadiums, I think it'll be really entertaining.
Because as ridiculous as it sounds, John, the event-going public who are going to be buying tickets to England versus Greece at Bramall Lane, the home of football, of course, of Sheffield United, best team in Yorkshire, they don't know that Greece are going to probably lose by 100 points. He says, putting the pressure on Sean Wayne. I hope he's not watching.
Well, an American friend of mine who lives in Sheffield, he's got a ticket to that game. I don't think he's ever seen a rugby league game before. But, you know, it's in Sheffield, it's an event, and obviously it's been marketed to people who aren't rugby league fans. And that's a good example. But just on what Jamie said, I mean, I've been lucky to be at FIFA World Cups, Rugby Union World Cups at Twickenham, Ashes Test. That game at Bounce Stadium in 27 is the best atmosphere I've ever seen of any sporting event. And I think if we can find a way to sort of fly over 50,000 Tongans from Auckland or Brisbane, that would be great. But no, but seriously, I mean, if we could kind of generate those kind of atmospheres, it doesn't really matter who's playing. It's a contest and the atmosphere is there. You want to be a part of it. And I think anyone who was there, who saw it on TV, saw something amazing. But to be there was something special.
And I think that's the other thing about World Cups that we shouldn't underestimate. One is the cultural side that goes along with it. So you want to be seeing a Sippy Town, you want to be, seeing a Hacker, you want to be hearing Fijian players who are going to go out and belt people, sing the most glorious hymn before they do it. We don't see this, and when it happens, it sends shivers down your spine. That's what makes it special. I think when you then add into the fact that you've got nations like Lebanon and Jamaica in the men's, I mean, Lebanon is an astonishing story when you think about what is happening in that country at the moment and has done, for too long. And admittedly, the vast majority of the players that will play for Lebanon will be heritage-based players from Australia. You talk to them about what it means. You talk to Michael Checker, who is coming over to coach the Lebanese team, whose family emigrated in a hurry from Lebanon to set up a life in Australia. He could not be more passionate than any coach we're going to meet. His team may not win a game, but the one thing he will imbue to any media that ask him the question, to any fans that are watching the output, is what it means to him and these players to don that shirt. And if we can get that across, which I think is something that we do really well in rugby league, that essence of community, it will be a success.
So if we can get Ali Jones in to bang out some hymns in Welsh before the game.
Just touching on what Phil said though, I mean, Rugby Union's taken a look at what's happened with the heritage rules in the Pacific in rugby league and copied it. Essentially they've changed their rules now. So Israel Folau, probably should mention, but he's playing for Tonga after playing for the Wallabies and there's numerous All Blacks.
Is that because they're the only country who'll let him play these days?
Perhaps, but they've realised that this is something that they're missing out on. So I mean, I think that's a nod to how well rugby league has handled this particular situation with heritage. People will say, grandparent rule, etc. But literally every sport does it, and it is, you know, something we can use quite well.
I'd love to be able to play for a different country. The game that I can't get past at this World Cup is England versus Brazil in the women's competition, opening up things at Headingley. I mean, Pete, you must have seen thousands of games at Headingley involving hundreds of teams. Did you ever think you'd see the Brazilian women's national rugby?
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to ask me why I was most looking forward to this. Because England against Brazil out of the league, it's just... I mean, you couldn't have imagined it a few years ago. Say there's going to be a big crowd, we hope. I'm not sure it'll be much of a contest, but it will be an occasion. And I think that everybody that goes to it is going to be impressed by the event and by certainly the standard of the English team. Hopefully Brazil give a good account of themselves. It's just going to be one of those I was there type moments, I think, and that's the thing I'm really looking forward to.
Are you going to Brazil this year, Joe?
Next year.
Next year.
Next year.
So come the 2025 World Cup, Brazil could be one of the big contenders in the wheelchair competition.
Potentially, I think the whole idea between the partnership with Wales Rugby League and Brazil is that it's to help them develop a wheelchair side and have a national side. So, you know, might not be the next World Cup, but even the World Cup after that, you know, it takes a long time to establish a nation in a competition such as the World Cup. So it's a start, and you know, we might find more nations come out and say, actually, you know, whether it's England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, can one of the home nations partner with us and help us develop the sport as well? And you know, we've got USA in my group pool this year. Up until teams were announced, did not even know USA were planning to put, you know, their hat in the ring. So it just shows where that development's going, and it's not just, you know, wheelchair, it is across all forms of rugby league, and it can only go to a positive place.
Jamaica has been mentioned. Based in Leeds, big Jamaican community here. We saw when they played Wales at Bellevue a few years ago, the carnival band there. We saw that at the England Knights game a couple of years. I mean, that feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it, at Headingley? But there's going to be some great opportunities for people to get involved and just enjoy a night of the rugby league, regardless of what the game's going to go.
I think Jamaica will probably be everybody's second favourite team. I think they're going to be entertaining. Obviously, they're going to find it tough. It's basically a team made up of players from the second and third divisions in this country, but they're going to be good value. We played Scotland at Featherstone last year. Got a draw. There was a samba band there playing afterwards with all the players.
Samba band in Featherstone.
Taking part. It was fantastic, and I think people will really get behind Jamaica. And you know, Greece are a good story as well. That's something a bit new for rugby league. I think there's just so many teams to take an interest in this time. I mean, you don't need to know anything about the players or anything like that. Just pick a team and support them. I think it'll be great.
Can I just say, the big thing about the Caribbean, certainly Jamaica for me, there's a big Caribbean community. Obviously, part of my heritage is from St Kitts, and there's a big St Kitts community in Leeds. But there's so much talent as well in that community. It's unbelievable. So, you know, there's school kids in Chapeltown and those areas that are winning athletics competitions every year, and athletically are world class, but never get exposed to the game of rugby league, so don't see it. There's no reason to see it. And you know, how many Jason Robinsons are there up there, how many Ellery Hamlers and so many other great players that are from that heritage that we can attract through games like that at Headingley. And it was brilliant. You know, the England Knights won in 2019. We had to tell them all, you can't bring big bottles of rum into the ground like that, curry goat and all sorts, Dutchy bottles. But for me, I think it's a talent ID opportunity as well, you know, to really get a demographic. Love Michael Leski at the minute, you know, he's a different accent from a different sort of nation as well, of traditionally big, strong human beings, and up he'll shine in this World Cup. He'll have to shine now. He's got weight over his shoulders now that Walmsley's don't like his fit. But yeah, lots of little talent ID and attractive opportunities as well with it.
We've got 10 minutes left. We'll ask for questions in a minute. I will go down the line. I'm not going to ask who's going to win, because that's just flippant. Who are you looking forward to most seeing in action player-wise at the World Cup, John? Or who should the people be looking out for?
Jeez, that's a hard question.
That's why I'm sat here asking them and not answering. I don't know.
There's a hospital pass.
I think it will be fantastic to see somebody like Cameron Monster live. I mean, he is arguably tipped as the best player in the NRL at the moment. His team have been knocked out early in the playoffs. I think that makes him even more dangerous because he's going to have a significant amount of rest. Brandon Smith for New Zealand is going to be fantastic. But I think sort of John hinted at it with the Samoans, that they could be anything in the men's game at the moment. And if they get that cultural side right, that apparently has been missing a little bit, they've always had talented players, but they've never really bought into the idea of what Samoa is and what it can do outside of just being a rugby player. The elements that make you proud to be Samoan, and I think that has been missing. But is it Frank Pritchard that they've got involved as their cultural officer? Now,
The Johns brothers getting involved, is that all in the bin now?
But if they can get that right, then seeing the likes of Jerome Luai, who we've seen for Penrith, again on his day, one of the greatest players of this current generation, why wouldn't you want to go and see him? And that's just a men's game. I mean, clearly I want to see Joey play.
JBW? Because Sonny Williams is busy. Who's either on your team or opposed? I guess you don't know anything about the Americans. You don't know anything about them.
No, I don't know anything about the USA team other than, I know some of the players that they've got are, ex-military veterans, so the veterans. Same as what a lot of our players in the wheelchair game in this country are. But they are the unknown. France is going to be my first group game.
You love the French, don't you?
I tolerate
French
them. I
sticks.
think they hate me. But I've been for that, for example, I've been mentioning to some of my Welsh teammates that watch, the Leeds and Catalan Dragons game, just for some pointers on some of the certain players from the French team that we will be playing. I will happily admit there's one French player I am not looking forward to playing, and that's because he's probably about 6 foot sat in his chair. And every time I've competed against him in the past 12 years, he has gone in and not given any allowances for everyone always seems to think I get allowances made because I'm female in a mixed team. I do not. But I wouldn't expect it either. So Danny is definitely one of those players that I know the moment I have the ball and he's close to me, he's going to send me flying off the pitch. And it's like, I sit very short, so I'm going to go up to him, try and tackle him and just be like this, trying to reach. But yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting group in my group. Same with England. They've got the likes of Australia, who I think are in the top 5 in the world. I know the top 3, which is France, England, Wales, and I can't remember who's 4th and 5th. They're somewhere in there. But that's based on the amount of international games that have been played, and obviously we had a 2-year period where we weren't playing. I'm definitely will be interested to watch the England lot against Australia, just because of the development that's happened on both sides of things. And yeah, I'm a little bit biased in some ways, definitely looking forward to watching some of, the men's and women's from Leeds represent each country. I've got favourites, but I'm not going to say that. Because we're just waiting for, obviously, selections to be announced for each team. But yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting time.
See, Phil, you let the side down. You didn't say you were looking forward to seeing Daniel Anderson playing. She only scored the other week as well. Nearly.
I am.
So obviously, what we're saying is we should buy tickets to go see Wales versus France.
I mean, I think so. If you want to see some
Violence.
big hits, yeah, it is. And then obviously, I think none of us hold back, but because the French play by a variation of the rules that we play in the UK, They're never quite sure as to what they can get away with.
Well, in fairness, the Women's Super League here plays completely different rules to the NRLW.
Yeah, so it's definitely, like, I think one game that I'm, you know, both looking forward to and dreading at the same time is that France game. USA, I'm down, you know. Scotland, I get to annoy Scotland's head coach, who is my ex-England coach. And every time I score, I go like this. So, yeah, definitely looking forward to it and counting down. There's actually a countdown in my house now, probably so that everyone can get rid of me for a few weeks.
Oh, I wish I was playing. Peter, who are you looking forward to seeing?
I think it's very difficult individually. I'm just looking forward to seeing Australia play because
They don't play, yeah.
So if they actually turn up, I'll be looking forward to seeing them. And as I say, Jamaica are going to be great fun. I think Brazil are a really good story as well. I'm just looking forward to the whole tournament. The fact is, we're going to get to visit new grounds, different places. I think there's a semi-final.
The Emirates.
So
Yes.
the Emirates, I think that would be excellent. I don't know if anyone went to the Challenge Cup final at Spurs, but that's a real good occasion. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Arsenal Stadium's like. And I think the final, double-header final at Old Trafford, which will be packed, will be just a real special occasion, one of those, you know, events that you just don't want to miss. And the whole tournament's going to be good.
Review of the press room coming in the post-tournament edition of Forty20 magazine.
Christmas special. What sandwiches did we get?
As an ex-player, what do you look forward to when you come to a tournament like this? Because are you wanting to be out there? Are you wanting to just sit down and enjoy it?
I'd always play one little bit, funnily enough. I'd give everything in my 22-year career. And I loved it, but yeah, different world now. I'm looking forward to seeing Courtney Winfield Hill. She's ready to play for England, isn't she? Super Aussie accent. Craig Richards. I think she'll bring a lot to that team as well. I don't think we've seen best of her this year, but I think that's a game where she's going to really come out of the shell and play well. Tara Jane Stanley, I think she's up for Woman of Steel. And listening to Craig Richards, you're not sure he's going to play at full-back as well. You know, he's quite cryptic with that, so I'm looking forward to seeing him in his game. I think they'll throw everything at kitchen sink at that World Cup. And the men's, my old teammate Callum Watkins, remember that ankle tap?
Sounds like.
I was there at Old Lang Park and I watched it. No! And of all the people in the world you'd want the ball to be in his hands, it'd be Callum Watkins. Just got in by a stud length. But I think he's been unbelievable this year in back row. And you know, he covers the multitude now. I think he's still obviously got the attributes of a great centre and a back rower. And I'd also, a big call this, John Wilkin was banging on about Andy Ackers at 9. I think he's been sensational this year. I know Brodie Croft has been unbelievable for Salford, but when you take a backward step and see who's making the plays 2 or 3 plays before, that presents the opportunity for Brodie Croft. I think it's Ackers, one of the smartest players, reviewing his games in the league at the minute. And I know Sean Wayne likes his fortuitous nines in like Mickey Mark and
He's Irish. He's Irish.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I'm just going off the mid-season international. But I think Andy Ackers, I'd like to see him get a goal as well.
If he's picking on form,
Yeah.
that's what they say. All international coaches in whatever sport, they say they're going to pick on form. I thought for a moment you were going to say pick John Wilkin. I thought that's a bit. I know things are desperate, but there's 1 minute and 35 seconds on my clock. But any questions? I'll throw it open as if I'm Fiona Bruce. No, that's good, isn't it?
Everybody's asleep.
I mean, the people on the internet, they can't see there's no people.
I'm stunned by your wisdom and your wise words.
Just talking to Jodie.
We'll go with that then. Thank you for coming. It's much appreciated. So much better than the audience was when we were in Featherstone and Castle and Wakefield. John, thank you. Good luck to Australia. Honest. Phil, magazine's out this week, isn't it?
Yeah, in shops on Friday. Subscribers possibly get it Thursday. Full of World Cup related stuff and all the usual columns.
How much of my column did I write this month?
Could possibly tell you.
So I'll go to
There's
look
a
for
great
first.
piece by Pete on what's happened at Wakefield.
which is now
Out of date. 24 hours after
Jody, good luck with the World Cup for Wales. You know, if England don't win, let's hope that you're singing with Ali Jones in the change rooms. No, don't. Peter, enjoy the match review panel next week. Hopefully Leeds have some involvement in that. And, well, not involvement, but obviously some future involvement. And the same for you, Jamie. Obviously, the best of luck with Leeds for the playoffs. And I'm not crossing my fingers this time. People think I don't like Leeds. But, you know, it's better than Wigan winning.
Got last Yorkshire team in there, aren't we? As Adrian Morley pointed out last week. So, yeah, all the best.
And thank you for coming, and thanks for watching, and enjoy the World Cup. I think that's how we end.